Hi, everybody. This is Mr. Tablizo from the Algebra 1 team, and we're here to talk about adding and subtracting positive and negative integers. As you can see, we start out with the number line where 0 is in the middle, and you have positive numbers to the right of 0. And you'll notice as we move to the right on the number line, the numbers are going to get larger and they are going in this direction. They are denoted in black. Okay. And on the other hand, if you go left, the numbers are getting smaller. Okay. And I've denoted those as negative numbers in red. Okay. So what I'm going to do is show you some examples to derive some rules for what happens when you add and subtract positive and negative integers. The first situation is when you add two positive integers. So to work the number line, let's start here. Okay. We're going to start at 3 and then we're going to add 5. Well, adding means I go to the right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I wound up with 5, 6, 7, 8. And that's how we got 8 using the number line. Okay, notice adding two positive numbers gives me a bigger positive number. Okay, so the second example says 3 minus 5. So we start again at 3 and we subtract 5, meaning we go to the left 5 steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we wound up at negative 2. Let's try that again using this second equation right here. We start out with 3, and then it says to add. So add normally means you're going to go right. But because the thing being added is a negative 5, we actually go back to the left 5. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And once again, we wound up with a negative 2. But because we want it with the same number, we come to the conclusion that adding a negative 5 and subtracting a 5 are exactly the same thing. So when I say 3 minus 5, it's the same thing as 3 plus a negative 5, and I wound up with a negative 2. And in this example C, it's very similar. 5 right here, 5, and I subtract 3, meaning I'm going left 3, 1, 2, 3, and now wind up with a positive 2. Same thing, adding from 5, I add a negative 3, which is subtracting 3, and you wind up with a positive 2. The question is, how come in this situation where I'm working with a 3 and a 5, and this second situation where I'm working with a 3 and a 5, this first one I wound up with a negative 2, and this one I wound up with a positive 2. What happened there? Well, it turns out that when you are adding and subtracting a positive and a negative number, the bigger number of the two dominates with that sign, meaning the result of your subtraction takes the sign of the bigger number. In this example, the negative 5, the 5 was bigger, so the final answer will have a negative on it because the 5 had a negative on it. In the second example, the 5 had a positive on it. So once I subtract, I still get 2. 5 minus 3 is still 2, but because the 5 was positive, the bigger number, 5, was positive, I want it with a positive 2. Okay? So that's our rule right here. Adding negative number and a positive number gives the sign of the greater number. Whichever one started out being a bigger number, that's the final sign you're going to come out with. And our last example here says, what happens when I add two negative numbers? Okay, so let's start out with a negative 5 here. And then we're going to go left again, 3. And that's how I wound up with a negative 8. And we already know that adding a negative number is exactly the same as subtracting. So the rule is whenever I add two negative numbers, it gives me a negative number. So all these rules that we learned right here are summarized in this box right here. So I made this slide for you as a reference. So when I'm adding a positive and a positive, I get a positive number, just like in this example. When I'm adding a positive or a positive number and a negative number, or a negative number and a positive number, I subtract them, and whichever one of those first two numbers is bigger, whatever that sign is of the bigger number, that's the sign we wind up with. Here, the -5 was bigger, so I get a -2. And here, the 5 is bigger again, but this time is positive, so I wound up with a +2. And finally, whenever you're adding two negative numbers, you wind up with a negative number. So hopefully those rules right here are starting to refresh your memory from middle school. And I've summarized them all in this box right here based on these examples and based on using the number line.